The arena was carved into bones of a mountain, its stone walls rising like jagged teeth into harsh desert sky. Once a sacred place of judgment, it had long since become a spectacle ground, where strength and pride were tested beneath the merciless gaze of thousands. Today, the crowd was restless. Rumors had spread like wildfire through the outer provinces. Saraxa, champion of the House of Blades, was to Duel an outsider, not a prince, not a warlord, not even a soldier. A nameless warrior wielding what many mocked as a stick. Kale stood alone at the edge of the blood-scorched sand, silent beneath the weight of chains that coiled around his waist and wrists. They weren't for restraint. He'd worn them into every battle since his exile. His back was a lattice of scars, each one a lesson, each one earned. A crude staff hung in his grip, nothing like the gleaming blades or arc shields favored by the elite. It was gnarled and dark, shaped from old wood and capped in dull iron. Ancient, yes, but unimpressive to the untrained eye. From the shadowed gate across the arena, she emerged. Saraxa moved like liquid metal, her armor reflecting the sun in blinding ripples. Her helm was horned, her limbs laced with glowing circuitry that pulsed like veins of fire. The crowd thundered her name as she walked. She drank it in. This was her court, her coliseum. Her legend had been forged here in shattered spines and severed limbs. She had never known defeat, not once, and today would be no different. Her eyes, though hidden behind the narrow visor of her helm, locked on Kale as she came to a halt. Her voice cut through the air, amplified for the masses. That's it? That's your weapon. A wave of laughter swept the stone balconies. If you can even call it that, she added with a smirk. Did you whittle it yourself while hiding in the mountains? Kale didn't answer. He rarely did. His gaze remained steady, fixed on her center mass. His breathing was calm. He had learned long ago that words were the armor of the insecure. Saraxa circled him slowly, deliberately, her voice oozing derision. I suppose the council thinks it clever to humor these backwater challenges. But you're just a shadow pretending to stand in the sun. Still, Kale said nothing. The arena's high priest, cloaked in crimson and ash, stepped forward with an iron scroll. He read the duel's terms in a voice like cracked stone. 1 strike each. Honor through precision. To yield was shame. To win was ascendance. When the rite was finished, the crowd hushed. The tension grew electric, as if the very stones held their breath. Kale shifted his stance, his fingers adjusting slightly on the staff. To the trained observer, it was the readiness of a man who had studied not combat, but anatomy. His eyes didn't wander to her armor, her glow, or the theatrics. He watched the rhythm of her breath, the slight tilt of her hip, the minute delay in her left step. Saraxa laughed again, raising one arm. Blades unfolded from her gauntlet like the wings of a mechanical bird. This won't take long. She struck first, not physically, but with speed. She dashed forward with blinding acceleration, each movement a blur. The staff was forgotten. Her arrogance demanded a performance. She launched a flurry of feints and slashes, testing him. Kale parried only once. The wooden staff moved like water drawn into a current, shifting effortlessly to deflect the blow. Not with force, but with angle. The blade kissed the staff and slid away, sparks dancing in the air. Saraxa recoiled, amused. Not bad for a relic. She stepped back, her blades humming. Kale remained still. 1 strike, he reminded himself. Only one. That was all he would need. But it had to be perfect. The crowd had grown restless again. The silence unnerved them. They wanted blood. They wanted spectacle. But Kale did not fight for them. He fought for something buried deep beneath shame and time. A promise, made in a dying breath. A mentor's whisper. They won't see it coming. Not because they are blind, but because they believe they know everything already. Saraxa tilted her head, as if trying to decipher him. Have you nothing to say? She asked. No or cry? No prayers to your mountain gods. Kale stepped forward once. Slowly, his staff lowered slightly, like a reed swaying the wind. But in his eyes, something changed. The kind of stillness that comes before a lightning strike. I've already spoken, he said. And then he stopped moving. That was it. No raised weapon. No shift in weight. But Saraxa tensed. The crowd didn't understand what had happened. Nothing had, yet everything had. Kale's silence was no longer passive. It had become presence. Even Saraxa's arrogance faltered, if only for a moment. She readied herself. Kale's fingers flexed once, adjusting the grip of the weapon. Then the priest raised his hand and dropped it. The duel began, and Kale did not strike. Not yet. He waited, his muscles taut, his senses absorbing every detail of her stance. Her first step forward, light on the heel. Her second, aggressive, her right arm lifting for a cleave, her shoulder rotating. There, in the time it took for a blink, he moved. The staff whistled through the air, not with brute strength, but with surgical precision. It twisted, angled, and struck. Not at the plated chest or the flashing weapon, but at a tiny seam just beneath her shoulder guard. There was a sound like a drum snapping in half. A flash of sparks. A pulse of light. Her armor cracked. The force was not great, but the placement was exact. A hidden node, an ancient flaw in design passed down through generations of overconfidence. Her arm went slack. The glow dimmed. Her knees faltered. She stumbled backward, gasping. The crowd was silent. Saraxa dropped to one knee, her chest heaving. Her pride collapsed faster than her defenses. She stared at him, eyes wide behind the mask. Not in pain. In disbelief. He'd seen her. Not the armor. Not the myth. Her. Kale turned without flourish and walked to the edge of the arena. The priest watched, stunned, as the staff tapped the stone floor with each step. When he stopped, Kale looked back once. Not at Saraxa, but at the place where her armor had cracked. Then he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "Respect the quiet weapons." And the arena roared. The silence that followed Kale's blow lingered like smoke, dense and suffocating. Even as the echo of the strike faded, its weight remained suspended in the hot air. Saraxa did not rise. She remained on one knee, armor cracked, breath uneven. Around them, the crowd rippled with disbelief, their cheers swallowed by confusion, as though unsure whether to celebrate or mourn what they had just witnessed. The high priest, for all his years presiding over such duels, hesitated. His ceremonial blade, once raised to mark the end of battle, hovered in the air as if afraid to acknowledge what had occurred. Saraxa had not yielded, but neither had she struck back. By the rights of the arena, she had lost, but her pride would not let her body admit it. Kale did not push for the acknowledgement. He simply stood, weapon resting at his side, eyes on the fallen champion. There was no gloating in his stance, no hunger for adoration. The strike had not been for spectacle. It had been a statement, silent but absolute. Then, slowly, Saraxa stood. The cracked plate at her shoulder glinted, fractured but still intact. Her arm trembled beneath the weight of her gauntlet. The damage more than cosmetic. Her once fluid movements had become stiff, uncertain. But the mask of confidence returned, sculpted carefully over the fissures in her composure. "You caught me off guard," she said, voice edged with forced calm. "A lucky strike." Kale said nothing. He had no interest in debating what she already knew deep down. She took a step forward, the weight of the crowd returning with her. The arena seemed to lean in, waiting to see what would follow. Would she break tradition and demand a second strike? Would pride force her into dishonor? "You think this proves something?" she asked, louder this time, eyes narrowing. "That your ancient weapon, your monk's patience, makes you better than me?" The crowd murmured. A few gasps, a few chuckles. This wasn't how champions were supposed to speak. Saraxa had never needed to defend herself with words before. Kale finally raised his head. "I don't think anything," he replied, voice calm. "You do." His words, though few, landed heavier than any strike. Saraxa's jaw clenched beneath her helm. Her fingers tightened around her weapon, but her limbs betrayed her again, a flicker of pain in her shoulder, a hesitation in her stance. "You insult everything we built," she said through gritted teeth. "You come here with your relic, your silence, your mystery, and you expect reverence." "I expect nothing," Kale replied. "Only truth." Her breath hitched. There was, beneath the steel and fire, the real wound. Not the cracked plate, but the unraveling certainty. She had trained for war, for domination, for speed and strength and spectacle. But Kale had come with something else. Precision and restraint, an understanding of weakness that no armor could shield. And now the whole arena had seen it. The high priest lowered his blade slowly, seeking a resolution. His eyes moved between the two figures, as if measuring the air between them. Syraxa turned suddenly toward the crowd. "You cheer for this?" she demanded. "A man with a stick who got lucky? Are you so quick to forget who defended your borders? Who silenced the rebels of the Eastern Gate?" Silence answered her. She turned back, helmet catching the sun, in a burst of defiance. "Fine," she hissed. "One strike. One moment. But it proves nothing without the rest of the fight." Kale stepped forward slightly, his expression unchanged. "There was no rest of the fight," he said. "Only the strike that matters." Her laugh was brittle, like glass grinding on stone. "You sound like a philosopher, not a warrior." "I was both," Kale replied softly, "until the world stopped listening to philosophers." There was movement on the far side of the arena. A cloaked figure stepped forward, an elder from the council, face lined with age and wisdom, but eyes sharp. He nodded to the priest, then addressed the crowd. "The rights are clear. One strike each. Syraxa has struck. Kale has struck." One faltered. The other did not. A murmur surged through the tiers of spectators, rippling like wind through dry grass. "Is it judgment you fear?" the elder asked Syraxa, or silence. She stood still, the weight of the words, the expectations of her name, the eyes of thousands, all pressed in. Then she turned from Kale and walked back toward the gate she had emerged from. Her armor, still gleaming, now seemed heavier. The chants of her name did not follow her. Only the thud of her footsteps echoed in her retreat. Kale remained where he was, motionless, until the gate closed behind her. Then he exhaled. He had not come for victory. He had come for clarity. And in a single, clean strike, he had found it not just in the breaking of armor, but in the collapse of illusion. The priest stepped forward again, this time more confident. He raised his hand and declared the victor, Kale of the Hollow Mountain. The name rang out, unfamiliar to many, but now carved into the arena's memory. Kale bowed his head once, not to the crowd, but to the earth beneath him. Then he turned, not toward the victor's tunnel, but toward the old path behind the altar, one used only by warriors who had nothing more to prove. As he walked, whispers spread to the audience. Who was he really? Where had he learned to strike like that? What other truths lay buried in the mountains from which he came? And though no one dared speak it aloud, a thought took root in their minds like a seed in fertile soil. Perhaps strength was not found in power alone. Perhaps the quiet blade was the sharpest. Kale disappeared into the shadowed passage, and the sun climbed higher over the arena, lighting the place where pride had cracked, and something far stronger had broken through. The passage behind the altar was narrow, winding, and shrouded in a cool, dry stillness that dulled the roar of the arena to a distant memory. Kale walked slowly, staff in hand, the weight of the duel already drifting behind him like a receding tide. The walls around him were carved with ancient glyphs, their meanings half erased by time and neglect, but he recognized them. They were not just markings, they were teachings, reminders of the old ways, of patience, of balance, of restraint. He followed the tunnel until it opened into a stone chamber, quiet, circular, with light pouring from a crevice above. At its center sat a low pedestal bearing a single object, a broken mask worn and smoothed by age. It was once his master's, left behind when the council exiled them both. Kale knelt before it, setting his staff beside him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he whispered, "I did not strike to win, only to show them." The mask offered no reply. It never had. Behind him, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly, cautious but deliberate. Kale didn't move. He knew who it was before the first word was spoken. "You could have humiliated me." Syraxa's voice was quieter than it had ever been. Unmasked, stripped of the echoing bravado she'd worn like armor for years. Her tone was not soft with submission, but with something far more dangerous, introspection. I didn't need to, Kale replied. You did that yourself. She stepped into the light, arms folded, the cracked pauldron on her shoulder catching the glow. Her face, revealed now, was striking, sharp eyes, high cheekbones, and a fear set to her jaw. But there was weariness, too, the kind that came not from defeat, but from the slow erosion of certainty. They want me to challenge you again, she said. The high houses are furious. You embarrass their champion. Kale turned his gaze toward her, calm. I didn't ask for this. No, but you made it matter, she said. That's worse. She moved closer, standing across from him, barely a meter away. They say your strike was lucky, that your weapon is beneath tradition, that you dishonored the arena. I've heard that before, Kale said. When I chose silence over blood, when I chose discipline over spectacle. Syraxa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you ever get tired of being righteous? I get tired of people mistaking truth for arrogance. She tilted her head slightly, studying him as if seeing a different man than the one who had stepped onto the sand hours ago. You didn't just strike me. You found a flaw no one else ever noticed. How? Kale looked up through the narrow shaft of light. Dust swirled in the beam like tiny stars. Because I wasn't trying to defeat you, he said. I was trying to understand you. The words struck deeper than any blow. Syraxa's gaze wavered. No one's ever done that, she murmured. They just tried to survive. That's the problem, Kale replied. Everyone who steps into that arena fights for survival or glory. But you can't see clearly when fear or pride blinds you. She stepped back, folding her arms tightly. You talk like a teacher. I was one, a long time ago. Syraxa fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the wind curling through the cracks in the stone. Then she asked, Why come back now, after all these years? Kale rose slowly, his movements fluid and controlled. Because they've forgotten, he said, what the arena was built for, what it once meant. It wasn't for showing off power, it was for understanding it. She swallowed hard, the truth of it settling into her. So what now? You walk away again? Let the houses twist the story. I didn't come for a story, Kale said. I came for change. Syraxa shook her head. Change doesn't come from winning a duel. It comes from leading. And leaders, they don't get to walk away. Kale regarded her for a long moment, weighing her words. And if I stay, then you better be ready, she said, because they'll come for you. And next time it won't be a duel. He gave the faintest nod. Let them. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to leave, but paused at the threshold. You taught me something today, Kale the Hollow Mountain. Something I didn't expect. He raised a brow. And what's that? That humility doesn't always feel like shame. Their eyes met one last time before she disappeared into the tunnel. Her footsteps light, thoughtful. Kale stood alone once more, staring at the broken mask on the pedestal. It had begun again. Not a war, not yet, but something subtler. A shift, the kind of change that started in whispers and moved like roots through stone. He retrieved his staff and turned toward the light. The city burned quietly beneath a blanket of dusk. It was not the fire of flames, but of unrest, smoke rising not from torches, but from friction, from the grinding of long unquestioned power against the stone wheel of change. In the upper spires of the high houses, voices clashed like swords behind gilded walls. The duel had cracked more than Syraxa's armor. It had split the illusion that strength alone defined leadership, and that fracture ran deep. Kale watched from a high terrace that overlooked the capital's inner sanctum, cloaked in the coarse gray of the mountain folk. He looked like a shadow drawn to the city's light. The arena stood in the distance, its columns still casting long, accusatory shadows. Rumors about him had grown like wild vines. Some called him a prophet, others a fraud. Some feared he was a ghost from a forgotten age, returned to unearth truths best left buried. He felt none of that. Kale wasn't interested in being legend. He had come only to show that power without understanding was a sword held at the wrong end. Yet the world didn't easily accept correction. It rebelled, and rebellion was stirring. Found you, came a voice behind him. Kale turned to see Syraxa approach, this time without armor. She wore a dark cloak and the simplicity of someone who no longer needed to be seen to be respected. Her hair was tied back tightly, her jaw still set like a warrior's, but her eyes were different, softer, sharper. She had come to the fire of humiliation and emerged tempered. "You shouldn't be out here," Cale said. "Not while your name is still echoing in council halls." "I needed air," she replied, "and clarity. You always seem to have both." He offered no denial. Saraxa leaned against the stone railing, gaze falling to the streets below. "The high houses are planning something. They're afraid, not just of you, but of what you've awakened. They fear what they can't control," Cale said, "and what they can't understand. They want to declare you illegitimate," she continued. "Call for a public nullification of the duel. Replace it with something more dramatic. War." She hesitated. "Not immediately. But enough skirmishes, enough misdirection, and the people will beg for order. And when they do, the houses will reassert their grip, harder than before." Cale nodded slowly. "So the question becomes, who speaks for the people before they forget their voice again?" Saraxa looked at him sharply. "Is that going to be you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured toward the arena in the distance. "That place was once sacred," he said. "Not for blood, but for truth. The duel was a language, one in which we could speak without politics, without lies. But over time, the houses turned it into theater." "And you want to return to what it was?" she asked. "I want to remind people it can be more," he replied. "A blade doesn't have to draw blood to cut deeply. A breeze stir the edges of their cloaks. Carry with the faint smell of forged smoke and evening bread." Life continued, unaware or perhaps unconcerned that history was bending under their feet. Saraxa's voice dropped. "There are whispers that the outer guild support you, that some of the lesser houses see your victory as a chance to realign the old hierarchy. I'm not interested in thrones," Cale said. "That's not the problem," she replied. "The problem is, they are, and they'll place you on one whether you want it or not, because a reluctant symbol is harder to discredit." He turned away from the view, facing her fully. "You're still with them?" he asked. "I'm with the truth," she answered. "And right now, that means standing beside the only person who made me see my own lies." Cale studied her. The pride still lived in her spine, but it no longer clung to arrogance. She had changed, and not just because of the strike, because she had chosen to grow beyond it. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "We don't wait for the houses to move," she said. "We force a reckoning, a new challenge, not a duel for blood, but a test of values, a trial, open to the people, broadcast across every province. No masks, no house favors, just truth." Cale's brow furrowed. "They'll never allow it." "Not if we ask," she said. "But if we show the people something undeniable, if we let them see what's been hidden, then the houses won't be able to silence it. Not without tearing apart the very illusion they've lived behind." Silence stretched between them. Cale walked to the center of the terrace, his eyes on the twin moons rising above the city's towers. "Then we show them," he said, "but not through spectacle, through presence, through precision." Saraxa smiled faintly, just like the strike. He nodded. In the days that followed, a quiet movement began, not with banners or songs, but with stories of Cale of the duel, of the crack in Saraxa's armor, and what it meant. Apprentices whispered it in training halls. Elders spoke of it in marketplaces. Young fighters began to ask questions they hadn't dared to voice before. Why do we fight the way we do? What are we protecting? Who decides the worth of a weapon or the value of restraint? And on the seventh day, a proclamation appeared across every gate and wall. The trial of renewal, before the public, by open call. Any voice may challenge, any truth may rise. Come not with fury, but with understanding. The arena awaits. Cale stood once again on the edge of the mountain-edge Colosseum, staff in hand, Saraxa beside him in plain garb. No chants rose, no crowds roared. Not yet. But they would come, not for blood, but for something far more dangerous to those in power. Change.